Hello, friends. A quick note before we jump into this episode. We are very excited because we had our first guest, but because this was our first guest, we discovered a few technical issues in the edit. That's why it took so long to get this episode out. Now we know going into the next round of this what we need to do to kind of take care of all that stuff before we get to the post-production part of the podcast. So this episode, sound quality may be a little bit different than the other two. We're still working all of it out, but thank you for your patience. And we are looking forward to sharing this one with you. This one was a lot of fun. Bringing another voice into the conversation always adds to the excitement and the thrill of it all. So thank you for listening, and here we go.
I'm finding out who I am. I'm black.
No kidding.
We thought you were Suzanne Summers.
That's not funny. When did this get to be such a big deal all of a sudden?
We all know we're different. I'm Blair Warner, and you're not.
This is Eastland to Langley, a podcast about the television show The Facts of Life. I'm Karen Bensinger.
I'm Scout Kirkpatrick.
And today is a brand new day because it is our first guest of our podcast series. We are here with our friend Deidre Smith to talk about episode 204, which is a Tootie-centric episode. And full disclosure, I was like, we are two white people, and I don't want to just be talking about the Black experience without maybe having someone who has lived it. So we reached out to our friend, and I have a big spreadsheet of people, and I said, Deidre, you're in here. You chose Tootie as your favorite. And this is also the first Tootie-centric episode of season 2. So welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me on here. I'm honored to be the first guest.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, what is your relationship at all to this show? If you have one at all, if you heard about it, seen it, what is your history with The Facts of Life?
Well, I have two parents who are Gen Xers, so they very much grew up with this show. And while I didn't watch The Facts of Life all the way through, like I did with some other sitcoms, I did know of it. And I know a lot of Kim Field's work just in general. And I watched some of Different Strokes, kind of like adjacent Facts of Life, like existence. But I've always known it was a thing. But it was great to actually be like, oh yeah, I should revisit that. Should really see what's going on there, what that was all about. So yeah, kind of a noob, I guess.
Well, that's exciting though, because that's what I kind of want to, I think, draw out in people, draw out of the public. I don't know, to kind of reignite the interest with our single podcast, at least with the people that I know, are like of asking like, have you watched this? Do you remember it? Had you never seen it? As I mentioned on my spreadsheet of potential guests, it was an interesting mix of people who were like, there were people who, there were only one or two people who were like, I've seen every episode more than once. Most people were like, seen it in passing, or, you know, I've seen a couple episodes. And I had a couple people say, I've never ever watched it, but I'd love to be on your podcast. So those will be some fun episodes. Yeah. So we have this, you know, you had, off mic, you had asked about kind of why we were starting with season 2. And I gave you the pitch on that, which our listeners, I always want to say viewers, they're not watching, they're listening. You know, they know we've kind of separated this. But that also means that this is really the first Tootie-centric episode we've had in this season. I think season 1 has...
There are a couple. There's like the one where her dad visits.
Yeah. Also, to the listeners, Scout has a cold and has like phone sex operator voice. So
I'm not sorry.
It's not a unique... I didn't bring on a professional...
I don't think anything about this sounds professional.
It sounds great. It sounds
Okay.
like smooth as velvety butter.
Some people pay for that voice, you know. Some people train their voices to sound like what you sound like, just sick.
It's true. It's like Phoebe in that episode of Friends where she gets the cold and she sounds great singing and she wants it all the time. She tries to recapture the cold. All right. So Scout, I'm going to hand it off to you for the summaries and the facts and all the stuff that you do, the research portion of the pod.
Yes.
And
Oh.
Deidre, if you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to interject.
This episode is titled Who Am I? It is the 4th episode, but it was actually filmed 5th because, as we discussed in the last episode, Shoplifting was filmed earlier in the season than it appears. The director is Lee Lockheed or Lockheed. I'm not really sure. It's not spelled the same as the military industrial complex company. But he was only active as a director for about 10 years, in which he directed 4 episodes of The Facts of Life. He directed 1 in season 1 and 3 in season 2. He also did work for Alice, Too Close for Comfort, The Munsters Today, and Harry and the Hendersons. Like, he did more work than that, but those were like the ones where he did multiple episodes. I don't know. I don't know much about this man. I am assuming it's a white man, but I don't have any evidence of that.
I would bet 100 cash dollars that every single person who wrote on this show was probably a white person.
I think so.
Or directed, just
Likely.
because it's 80s Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to say, I didn't get any clues from the last or first name on whether this could be someone who was not.
Yeah.
So.
The writers on this episode are Linda Marsh and Margie Peters, which are the same pair of women who wrote Double Standard, the previous episode that we did.
Okay.
This aired on Wednesday, December 17th of 1980. And at that time in history, during that week, on Sunday, December 14th. Okay, have you guys heard of this? There was like a terrible massacre at the Bob's Big Boy on La Cienega in Los Angeles. It was like a robbery gone bad. 4 people died. I don't know.
Why are you?
Because this is something that happened in history and was also
right. I was like,
happening
what a way to open the episode.
in Los Angeles.
Okay, no, this is okay. So this would be happening. Where was that? I know where the one Bob's is in Burbank. I don't know where the one would have been in the 80s. Not that that matters at all to the story. I was just thinking because Burbank would be close to the studio system, but
Like, isn't that not in Burbank? I was recently just there like a few months ago getting my cats fixed. So I've been to the Big Boy.
yeah, but that one's on Burbank Boulevard. This is a geography podcast about Los Angeles landmarks. Well, anyway, that's terrifying.
Yeah, so that's awful. I didn't know if anyone had heard of this because I hadn't.
No, oh my God.
This same week, on Tuesday, December 16th, Colonel Sanders died at the age of 90.
God, what a week.
These are the things that I discover.
And the KFC has gone downhill ever since.
Right? On Thursday, December 18th, Christina Aguilera was born.
Hey, finally, a bright spot.
Greatness.
On Friday, December 19th, Jake Gyllenhaal was born.
Wow.
Yeah. Who knew they were almost birthday twins?
I know, wow.
What is that? Is that Capricorn?
Ooh, or Sagittarius. It might be Sagittarius.
It's like at that edge
Yeah.
point of like Sag. I'm sure there's going to be people that are like, it's fucking Capricorn, you should know. Or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of cuspy, whatever's going on there.
Interesting.
And then in our last tragic news for this week, on Saturday, December 20th, the Trapp family lodge in Vermont, which was owned by the family, like the Von Trapps, for which The Sound of Music was based on, burnt down.
Ah.
So they yeah, they escaped Austria and went to Vermont, and then their whole home burned down, and that's really sad.
Wow. This
Yeah.
is the strangest collection of events you have brought to the table so far.
It was a weird week.
December of 1980.
A lot was happening.
Well, wasn't earlier in the month, wasn't John Lennon shot?
Yeah, like the previous
December
week.
of 1980. Wow. Okay. So a lot was going on.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Terrible year.
yeah.
Or end of the year. Anyway.
And that's why people had to turn to
Gosh.
television to take their minds off of it.
Here we go.
The top song was still Lady by Kenny
God,
Rogers.
Kenny Rogers and Lady. He's been dominating the charts for months. Ugh. I mean, I'm sure that people love it, but I want to hear something else.
Yeah, I agree. So movies, Raging Bull was released nationwide,
Okay.
which is, I guess, a well-known movie that I have not seen.
Directed by Martin Scorsese,
Yes,
starring
I
Robert De
know.
Niro.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
That sounds familiar, but I haven't seen it.
Full disclosure, I actually have never seen it, but I know
You know of it.
I know of it, and it's in my stack of things I need to watch.
Okay, good to know. I'm going to write this.
Yeah. We have like a bunch of movies this week, actually, so get
Oh.
ready. We're going to write them all down.
Okay, got it.
Because also what came out this week was The Jazz Singer, which was a movie starring Neil Diamond,
yeah.
Laurence Olivier, and Lucy Arnaz, which is a weird combination.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a remake of The Jazz Singer, which was the first movie with sound, which is about a man in blackface.
Oh, God. Really?
Yes. I don't think that happens in the Neil Diamond. I don't know what happens in the Neil Diamond version.
I didn't see
I'm
it.
afraid to find out.
I mean, I knew it was a remake, but I did not know.
Isn't that the one that has "Coming to America" in it? What coming to America? You know that song. Okay. Anyway, carry on.
Oh wow. Yeah, let's see if there's a movie that I know.
You might know this one because the next one that came out is 9 to 5
Okay.
with Jane Fonda.
Oh,
yeah. So that's a
Oh, yeah.
classic.
Jane Fonda and
Lily Tomlin and Dolly Parton.
Yeah, Dolly friggin' Parton. Come on.
You got to say all of them.
They're all equally important.
Yes.
Also, the Aristocats came out this week.
Okay.
I love that film. Oh my gosh.
It's like with Disney films, you can forget how old they are sometimes, and like.
Did it
Really?
Was it released this week or was it re-released? Because I think it's from.
That's a good
older than
question.
that. This is not a Disney podcast, so we don't have to be super accurate. But
That's entirely possible. I was just using a source.
I think it's a it's a 1970.
Yeah, it is re-released. Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, it takes me the longest time to figure out that Snow White came out in the 30s. And now I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah. That messes with me too.
One of the reasons why I originally asked for this kind of information is twofold. One is, what were the conditions of the world or the state of pop culture when these episodes were being written and put out there? And also, I think just the perspective of like, okay, if we are to assume our characters in these shows are of a certain age, like what are they kind of taking in? Because they do occasionally reference pop culture, not that often, but something like the Aristocats, well, it came out originally in 1970, was re-released in 1980. A bunch of 12 to 15-year-old girls probably saw it. Well, I guess some of them were too, but when it was born, when they were, it doesn't matter. Keep reading.
So some other movies that came out this week. Seems Like Old Times, a movie with Goldie Hawn and Chevy Chase. It was directed by Jay Sandrich, and I was like, why do I know that name? And it's because he directed like a lot of TV,
Yes.
like lots of Mary Tyler Moore.
Yes, that's where you saw it most
Soap,
recently.
Cosby Show, Style and Substance with Nancy McKeon. Like, he's all over the place.
He's working.
Yeah. There was also like an Agatha Christie movie that came out with like Tony Curtis and Rock Hudson in it called The Mirror Cracked. There were so many movies that came out this week, but I guess it's because it's like near Christmas, so they're trying to give people something to go see in the theaters.
It's end of the year stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. The number one movie that week was Stir Crazy with Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. Do you know that one?
I've heard of it. I still haven't seen it, but it is on my list.
Okay, I hadn't even heard of it, so I'm glad one of you has.
Isn't this the one where... No, they did a couple movies together. Is this the one where they're wrongfully sent to prison for a crime they didn't commit?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, and then for TV this week, it was, again, we were up against Soap and a TV movie. The TV movie was called The Millionaire, and the synopsis was, 3 people's lives are drastically changed when they are given $1 million each by an eccentric billionaire.
Was it Blair Warner?
I mean...
Did she say, here's $1 million, everyone? Just so she could watch them burn? That's a fan fiction I'll write later.
Yeah, please do. And from here, we're going to go into 4 different episode synopses from 4 different sources so that we can start our discussion of the episode.
All right.
According to the Bible,
Which is the DVD insert from the box set.
Perfect.
this episode is described as Tootie has an identity crisis when a new boyfriend criticizes her for having so many white friends.
That did happen.
Is that her boyfriend though?
I mean, yeah, that's a point that could
Talk
be...
more about that.
She tried.
Yeah, that's a point that could be debated.
Yeah.
According to Wikipedia, Tootie falls for an African-American boy, but becomes conflicted when he comments that she only hangs out with white girls.
Okay. Also, that happened.
Yeah, it.
According to Tubi, Tootie confronts a major cultural identity crisis when a new boyfriend questions the, quote, real motives of her predominantly white friends and schoolmates.
Interesting.
That gives us a little more...
Do we rank these?
You can.
I don't know. That one at least gives us a little more gristle to chew on.
Yeah. Did you have a fourth one?
Yeah, on IMDb, Tootie falls for a black boy who tries to drive a wedge between her and her white friends.
Ow.
Yeah.
Well, that also, I guess that is another way of looking at it.
Succinct, I guess.
Yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so those are the... I mean, if we were ranking, the Tubi one at least is the most thorough, I think.
Yeah, I'm mixed on these. I don't know.
I feel like I would rank it the Wikipedia one,
Okay.
the Tubi one, the DVD Bible one, and then the IMDb.
Yeah, I think I could live with that.
And I don't know who sources the IMDb. It could be a rando who just was like, here's what it was.
Yeah, it could just be someone's opinion.
It could be like John Green 429864XX1 user.
Yeah, it's true. It feels like which feels like a real person who's actually watched the show and cares about it. I think maybe.
I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. One no. Yeah.
Let's all I'm gonna start the summary and we can discuss as we go because there's a lot
to
that
discuss
goes on here. A note just on the intro, it's the same intro that we've had through the season, but I don't know if we commented on this before, but I noticed like Tootie's the only one who looks into camera. Kim Fields looks into camera on her like credit. Everyone else has like pieces pulled from episodes, but for whatever reason she's like straight down the barrel and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's a bit odd.
Yeah.
I don't know why they couldn't find a good clip of her.
But I feel like through the run of this series, there's different times because I know there's definitely one of like Charlotte Rae where she's like looking
She's like
into
vamping.
it. Like, yeah, I feel like also there's a Lisa Whelchel one where she's looking in the camera, but I don't think everyone does it, so I don't know why they have these.
Okay, so there's no pattern.
No, and I'm wondering if did they do just a set of them and then they pulled whatever they thought was the I don't know. It was just I just noticed it this time. I had Tootie on the mind and I was like, she's looking at us. She's calling us out. She's like
looking through.
All right, so in this episode, we open in the cafeteria. Tootie and Natalie enter while Mrs. Garrett is doing some kind of paperwork. Tootie is prompting Natalie to call some boy. Natalie's very reluctant about it, and they do a lot of like making chicken noises at each other to the point where Mrs. Garrett is like, the box stops here, and she thinks it's hilarious that she said it. And I mean, she did sell it really well, I guess. But what they're talking about is Natalie wants to ask this boy Alan to be her dance partner for the contest. There's a dance contest, and she's worried he'll throw her out and never take her back. So she's feeling nervous. Then we have the entrance of Fred, who is this young black teenage boy. For the way he entered, too, I couldn't tell if he was trying to be cool or if he was struggling with carrying the candy case. But he has like a certain way that he entered that I wasn't sure if it was like a character thing or just the physicality of what he was actually doing.
It felt like a choice. It felt like a choice.
He kind of like struts in like, but he also was trying to lug that candy case in. He's there to restock the candy machines. His uncle is Mr. Davis, the gentleman who usually does it, who we've never ever seen in the course of the series. In fact, this is the first time I think we've talked about stocking the candy machines.
Yeah. It's never come up.
Tootie, she notices him immediately and she's like, hey, as she is with, I think, any attractive guy that comes her way, she's just very interested. She's like, hey, let's talk. He has this line where he says, I'm so together, you can't tell where I begin and where I end. But his delivery is weird.
His delivery is kind of gay, to be honest.
It comes off very like... Yeah. But I was like, is this just because it's 1980? I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. It's the lingo there was very interesting. I was like, okay.
There is a lot of that throughout this episode where people are like saying things. There's a conversation later with the girls where it's all the stuff that is like kind of triggering Tootie to be like, y'all are making me crazy. It's like people are speaking in ways we'd never hear them speak any other time. That I'm like, what's going on? Whatever's going on with the way he's describing his beginnings and endings, Tootie is like, I like his continuity. She's into him.
Mm-hmm.
He goes into the lounge to stock the candy machines. Then we have Joe and Blair entering together at the hip, as they always do. Tootie has left her sketchbook in the library. Blair wants to know what Joe was doing in the library in the first place, even though they just entered together. So I don't know at what point they...
Were you not just in the library together? Like, what's going on here?
I can't deal with him. She's like, what were you doing in the library, reading Dumbo? And Joe says, I don't need to read Dumbo, I bunk next to her, because she's got to get that shot in there.
Oh, Joe.
They're ridiculous.
Is this like an enemies to lovers
I mean,
storyline in the making?
in our hearts, yes, that's what we're... So the overall consensus in people who've watched this show, people look at Joe and they're like, that has to be a lesbian, right? Just because she's kind of butch, she rides a motorcycle, she's really tough. But my thesis in doing this podcast is that I am convinced Blair Warner is the most queer of them all, even though nothing in the narrative is really saying that, but I'm convinced it is. But either way, yes, they are enemies to lovers. This is a template that has been copied down the line a million times through fan fictions and I think canon series series that look back at it. The show itself even at one point references an old show about a bickering husband and wife while Joe and Blair are bickering with each other. And I was like, you guys know what you're up to.
I agree with you on that, I think. Especially seeing the pilot. I would agree with you, because how would she know?
Yes.
Yeah.
How would
Yeah, she's very she's very defensive of like, well, you must be a lesbian because you have all the signs of lesbianism.
the projection is real?
Yeah, truly.
Yeah.
Very much so.
100%.
Yeah, so these two idiots in love move on to the next thing. So Mrs. Garrett is looking at Tootie's sketchbook, and it's full of these fashion designs that she's done. And they look super professional, by the way. They're like, I was like, Tootie
is a better artist than Blair, maybe?
And Blair is the one who is canonically an artist with her painting of Quasimodo that she did last season. A real thing that happened.
Can you remind me how old they are? Like roughly how old they are in this season?
So in the narrative of the show, Tootie would be like 12. She's supposed to be 11 or 12, but Kim Fields is 2 years younger than what she's playing. That's why in season 1 they have her on skates, so she's taller, and then they got rid of that for the rest of the show. Because also they had that poor girl like climbing the stairs in roller skates, and I'm like, number one, dangerous. Number two, she is literally a child.
Yeah,
like
it's kind of
this
terrifying.
has to be against labor laws. But she navigates it all very well. So she and Natalie, I think, are like 12 and 13. And Blair and Joe are both 15. They're the same age because they're sophomores, and the other two are still in junior high, I think. So Eastland is a boarding school. There's no real definition as to what age you are when you go there, but I assume it's a middle and high school. This is so interesting because, again, this is the first time we've had questions from a guest because we're just used to like diving in. So this is great. I love this. And also, one of the reasons I wanted to get a couple episodes under wraps before having a guest was to figure out the rhythm of what we're doing. And then this like popped up right away, and I was like, well, we're doing a guest, so this is great. Mrs. Garrett's looking at Tootie's very professional design sketches. And they're for an art project for her class. She was supposed to do a still life, but Natalie kept eating the nectarines because Natalie believes nectarines shouldn't just sit there, which is true of any delicious fruit. I will agree. Because of that, Mrs. Wilson, the art teacher, said that Tootie could do fashion designs instead. And Tootie really wants to be able to make one, but she doesn't have any of the fabric or materials to do this. And then we lead into Blair. She does this in the first season, but she has not done it yet in the second season, which is she has her catchphrase, which is like, I just had another one of my brilliant ideas, which this phases out probably once they're
in college, maybe.
Yeah. She does it, but she does it there's a stretch where this is her thing with the hair toss and everything. So Joe says it's just the tacos from lunch, but Blair ignores her. And she says, no, her father just sent her a bunch of fabric from Hong Kong. But I'm like, why is your father sending you just like rolls of fabric to school?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Truly.
And Blair's family, Warner Textiles, is one of the major companies that they own and operate. So it makes sense that he would have fabric to send her. I just don't know why he's like,
here you go.
Because it's like a 6-foot long like roll of fabric. Blair will love this.
Mail that. Like...
Yeah, right. Like, how is it getting there?
Blair maybe or maybe not has mentioned like a desire for fabric before. Yeah,
my daughter loves fabric,
and he shipped it all the way from Hong Kong too.
I mean, listen, they're rich. They can do what they want. They are rich white people. They can ship fabric from Hong Kong to New York as much as they want.
That's true.
Anyway, so she says, hey, I have this fabric that's like nice and good quality, expensive fabric. Why don't I give it to you so you can do one of your designs, and then I'll have a dress for this dance contest party. That's a big deal, I guess. So Tootie thinks that's great. They both can kind of benefit from this situation. And then Blair has to say, well, it won't take much fabric because I'm only a size 7. And then Joe takes another shot at her. We have a lot of like body shaming jokes in this era, in this time, because she says, what in your feet? But I also think it's interesting that in 1980, a size 7 would be considered like
a nice size to be.
Very thin. And I'm like, size 7's like average. That was interesting. How we've just changed our perspective on size and the number.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those things I made a note on because I was like, a size 7 I thought at the time I thought she was like 14. I'm like, wouldn't that be considered big? But also, I've lived through the early 2000s in which my brain is mush and doesn't know anything about what is an actual size. So I was like, oh, okay, all right, size 7, pretty
And I think with fast fashion and stuff, they have definitely, it's been a thing that like different companies have different sizes so that people can feel like they're buying a smaller size, and all of this business of selling people on self-esteem or lack thereof. I don't know what, I'm not in the fashion industry, but
It's very interesting to see how it's differed so much from like, we watch something from like 2003 and it's like fabric only need, I'm a 00.
yeah, like
yeah.
I think were sizes in like the aughts that like didn't exist 20 years before then.
Yeah.
Right.
Mrs. Garrett asks if Blair plans to enter the dance contest, but she's like, no, Tootie and Carl, they're gonna win. She's not even gonna bother with it. And what I liked about this is, one, like Blair knowing when she's outmatched on something, and for as much as she gets flack for being kind of the rich spoiled girl, one, she's like, no, I'm not going to try to like do something I'm not good at. And two, throughout this series, and especially I think in these earlier years, there is a vibe, I think, between Blair and Tootie of like older and younger sister, because they've existed in these spaces together. And so I just liked the idea that she's like, she kind of knows this is like something for Tootie, and she's like, no, like, you go win your dance contest. I don't need to win that. I will be there looking beautiful in a dress that you made for me out of the expensive fabric my father sent to me. So that will be what I do, and you do what you do. So I thought that was she was like gonna let Tootie have her moment with that.
Yeah.
And then Tootie like demonstrates a dance, a quote dance. It's just like 3 moves.
That's what Carl is.
And it's like, but the audience goes crazy for it. They're like, yes.
She ends with like a little disco flourish.
Yeah, it's what is it? 1980. We've still got a little disco left.
Yeah, we're still allowed.
I don't know if you guys experience this whenever, like, maybe it's because like I hate being told when I'm supposed to feel something. Okay. But like when they were getting prompted for everyone to be like, getting prompted for like, Tootie doing this like not even a 2-step. Yeah. I was like, was I supposed to think that was good? And it actually made me really frustrated. So like,
it was 3 halves of dance moves and not really anything.
It was cute. We'll give it that.
You have to see.
It's true.
That's what I'll say.
That's true. Mrs. Garrett wants to interject with her story about how she was the jitterbug queen of Appleton, Wisconsin, and does some demonstrating, and no one is impressed by this at all. And even Fred is watching from the vending machines, and he's just like, what is this white
judging
woman doing?
Yeah. Wow.
Mrs. Garrett sends everyone off, but Tootie is kind of like, I want to hang out down here with this cute guy who's stocking the vending machine. So she heads off to the lounge and she introduces herself, and he offers her a candy bar. Oh yeah, Scout.
Oh, but first she like throws her sketchbook down on the couch to like get his attention, and it's just like such a move. It's really good. I loved that moment.
I mean, Tootie does later pursue acting as a career, so she has the flair for the dramatic for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, he offers her a free candy bar. He asks what it's like to go to Eastland, and she says it's a combination between summer camp and Sing Sing. And as I was watching this, I was like, the only reason I know that like Sing Sing is a prison is because of pop culture. It's just that it's referenced whenever people are like, a prison like Sing Sing. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I know what it is.
You just know it's
just
bad.
A weird reference point. I am from the Generation X, but I don't know. I only know about that from like context from other things. He asks if she has any sisters at school. She says, no, but I have 2 brothers at home. And he's like, no, I mean sisters. And she's like, oh, of course, yeah, of course, because he wants to know if she has any black friends, which Tootie does not. That's part of the whole exploration of the episode. And he suggests she's in an ivory tower, and she gets pissed. She's like, no, I have a lot of friends who treat me as an equal, which is right when Blair comes in with her big old ream of fabric and is very Blair, just being like, am I interrupting? Of course I am not. Hello, I'm here. And what I'm thinking is this design, and she talks about the design that she liked best from Tootie's notebook, and Tootie takes notes on that while Fred kind of watches. And once Blair leaves, he suggests that Blair's just using Tootie, but Tootie's like, she's like, no, I want to make this dress because, and she doesn't really explain the why, but she basically tells him to back off. He says that Blair talks down to her, and Tootie's like, Blair talks down to everybody, that's who she is. He asks if Tootie's ever been invited to Blair's house, and she says no, but also Blair's never been invited to my house. And she says they're tighter than the Osmonds, and he says, yeah, the Osmonds plus 1 Jackson, which is a bunch of dated music family references for the time. The Jacksons, I think, still have cultural relevance. The Osmonds, I'm not sure if anyone...
Not so much.
I mean, I know who they are, but
yes.
I don't know much that's point.
And for the listeners, they were a Mormon family of singers. Donnie and Marie were the two forefront. What do I want to say? They're the ones.
Breakout stars.
The breakout stars. Donny Osmond, I mean, he had some cultural relevance up through the 90s, maybe.
Wasn't he on The Masked Singer?
Oh, probably.
Anyway.
He says, I'd hate to see such a foxy chick like you fading in front of my face. And she likes being called Foxy, doesn't like the reference to the fact that he thinks she's fading. And he uses a horse mixing metaphor about race mixing, but she's like, no, I don't like that. But then he kind of flirts with her and she's like, okay, which that's kind of a thing that occurs a few times here where
yeah, she kind of is like, no, stop saying things like this to me, I don't want to talk to you anymore. But then she's charmed by him.
And the thing is like when he's charming to her, he is charming.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's kind of leaning in really hard, it's like, which I guess, I mean, he's probably what, a 16-year-old? Which
right.
Is, oh, okay, that's a little, like, she's like in junior high.
Yeah. But it's also 1980. And like,
At the most.
age gaps were not as much of a thing then.
Yeah.
Neither was like smoking in restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
We don't do that anymore either.
It's true.
We move on to the next scene where Natalie is practicing her phone call to Alan on a banana phone. It's just a banana she's using as a phone. But she's frustrated, so she just peels it and starts eating it because she can't. Even in her fictional conversation with this guy, he's still rejecting her. Joe just suggests that she be direct with him and essentially threaten him into going to the dance with her. This is when we have the moment revealed that Joe and Blair are laying on Joe's bed playing backgammon in a way that I was unsettled.
Blair is very comfortable on Joe's bed.
She really is. And for two people who 3 episodes ago were about to rip each other's faces off, it's
pretty intimate.
It's just interesting.
Some things have happened.
That's kind of how I feel. I mean, it is also that thing of when you are that age, it's like people are kind of like, you can be very hot or cold with someone. But it was just really like close staging that I was like, wow, they're just
on the bed together.
Backgammon.
Yep.
Which they do regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Natalie is wearing a really weird sweater that I couldn't make out what was going on. It definitely has a woman's face on it, and I couldn't tell if she was like kissing a baby or
a kitten
or holding a kitten or examining something, but it was very specific, and then I forgot to kind of follow up and look at it more.
So did I, but it was a weird sweater.
That was weird. Yeah.
Like at this point, we didn't really have a reference on how much time had passed, but then when Tootie enters, Natalie kind of throws out some exposition that she's been spending all her time down at the candy machine with Fred. I assume it's been a couple of days.
Yeah.
And Tootie confirms that she's getting free peanut butter cups.
And Natalie's jealous.
Blair suggests that, well, that's certainly the key to romance, along with a hefty advance on a prenuptial agreement, because that's the kind of girl she is, because she's thinking about all the paperwork of a marriage at 15 or whatever. Tootie, we have the callback, which you noticed, to her roller skates, because she's not wearing them anymore, but she's oiling her skates. You know, she's saying she's attracted to Fred's mind because he makes her think about stuff.
Well, and also we noticed that there's finally decorations on the wall up by Tootie's bed, because in that first episode, like Joe and Blair's side of the room, well, I guess it was the second episode, Joe and Blair's parts of the room were all set up, but Tootie and Natalie's bunk bed didn't really look like anything, but now there's actually like pictures of people behind Tootie on the wall, and that's a change.
And I couldn't tell if they were anyone. I don't know if they're like supposed to be like.
Yeah, I
people she
couldn't
knows,
tell if they were
or-
like family pictures or if they were supposed to be like famous people, because they just looked like portraits. Like,
And I didn't look too closely, and they're not prominently featured, but I would like to investigate that more just to see if they're. Because like Mrs. Garrett has that wall of like people who inspire her, and it's like.
JFK, Emily Dickinson, like
And like Eleanor Roosevelt.
There it is again.
I want to know who Tootie is posting up. I feel like later on she also has like her like fan stuff. Like
yeah, like Michael Jackson stuff.
she gets really into Jermaine Jackson.
Yeah.
Like insanely into Jermaine Jackson. Later on there's an episode where she's standing hard and Mrs. Garrett is like, I don't know what to do with her. But anyway, right now it's just some framed photographs. Anyway, she's been spending a lot of her time down there talking to Fred. She's attracted to his mind, and Joe has this comment that she feels the same way about John Belushi, who it would be old to her.
It's delivered so earnestly, and I don't know what to make of it. It's so weird.
It's just telling me that she's a lesbian. Like who's like I'm like what 15-year-old
I
girl
don't
is like
know.
I'm really into John Belushi.
Yeah, it's a mystery.
I mean, I don't know.
There wasn't even of irony in that, which is very interesting.
Well, and at that point, like, he was best known for, I mean, he didn't have much, he wasn't alive much longer. He passed away in 82.
Oh, wow.
But like the Blues Brothers, I mean, Saturday Night Live, of course, and Animal House would be kind of his primary. It fits with Joe's, what I would assume are Joe's sensibilities of what she would enjoy to watch. It's just such a random.
It's a weird comment for sure.
It's bizarre. Tootie says that Fred makes her think about what it is. And Natalie's like, what is it? And there's a whole
Honestly,
it's
a
so
great
earnest.
moment.
It's so earnest between these two. Joe points out that Tootie missed the dance committee meeting because she was too busy chatting with Fred, and Tootie's immediately like, oh no, like she's regretful because she's supposed to help with the decorations. And Blair's just, she's like, what am I gonna say to Mrs. Garrett? And Blair says, oh, don't worry, it doesn't matter, any little white lie will do. Tootie wants to know why the little lie is white and what color are the lies that are killers. And I appreciate that Blair's like, I don't know, plaid. Like, she's like, I don't know, what are you asking me? Joe comments like, better come up with something or you'll be behind the 8 ball. And Tootie wants to know, why is it the 8 ball? Because the 8 ball is black. And Joe's like, okay, fine, the 6 ball, I don't care what ball it is.
This is like the moment where it's like, when do any of these girls talk like this?
Yeah, this was like weird phrases that were only brought in so they could have this back and forth
conversation spiral mode.
Yeah.
It is very stagey, like a stage play. Joe's like, what's up with you? Natalie's like, 80 candy bars a day would make anybody jumpy. Mrs. Garrett comes in to tell Tootie that Carl is there to rehearse, and that they made decisions about decorating for the dance and getting ready for it, in which Blair will take care of the ceiling, which I was like, what does that mean? I guess maybe hanging streamers, but what a weird way to put it.
Yeah.
Natalie has the walls and Tootie gets to do the windows, which I'm sure means wash the windows. And she is unhappy about it. So they go down to the kitchen where Carl is there.
He's just eating out of the fridge.
The freezer. She's defrosting the freezer.
I don't know
And
what.
He's licking stuff out of the freezer. I don't know what is going on with Carl.
But he doesn't go here.
Is Carl recurring? Or is he like
No.
Oh, okay. So this was confusing. Then I was like, is this a thing he does?
Maybe he
or-
does, but we don't know about it. And Carl is a white child, which is maybe why he has weird habits of eating out of the freezer. I don't know. I don't know what he's up to. But he's her dance partner. So this is a reveal that she's, I mean, granted, everybody at this rich ass boarding school is mostly a bunch of white kids, so it's not really a shock. And I'm assuming he goes to Bates Academy, which is the boys' school up the road.
Presumably.
Because Eastland is a girls only school.
Because that's not gay.
Listen, a lot is going on here.
Not at all.
So Tootie's like, I can't rehearse with you. And he's like, we have to, because if we don't, overconfidence is the enemy here. In the background, Mrs. Garrett's kind of fighting with her whole defrosting situation. Tootie insists she can't be Carl's partner. And then he's asking her why. And she's like, well, last year we worked so hard and all we got were Frisbees. And he's like, well, this year the prizes are 2 portable stereos. And imagine a time when that was exciting that you could get a portable stereo.
With tape decks.
With a tape deck.
Ooh.
Yeah.
How much is that going for him? I don't know.
Honestly, though.
And I don't even know what portable means. Like,
Yeah, is it like a boombox
does
you
it
can
just
carry
mean that,
around?
like, it runs on batteries, but it's still huge? I don't know what portable stereo even. We don't see it, so
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in that, actually.
Yeah.
So she kind of tries to duck the subject again when he like asks her why, and she's like, this time she says, well, I get nauseous when you throw me in the air. And he's like, well, it's an attention grabber, but I won't throw you in the air. And then finally she's just like, I can't be your dance partner. And he exits by saying, women, if I live to be 30, I'll never understand them. Poor Carl.
Poor Carl.
Like, huh? Hey, Carl, I'm gonna need you to have aspirations past 30, but
Yeah,
okay.
Honestly.
That's fine. Are you good, Carl?
Listen, he's eating out of the freezer. I don't know what his
There
deal
is something wrong with him.
Carl, he loves to
Yeah.
dance.
Probably not good. At
He's
all.
dancing while he can. So Mrs. Garrett is like, what is going on? What is happening with you? And Tootie says that Fred just told her how... Okay, I made a note. That doesn't make any sense.
Tootie essentially tells Mrs. Garrett that Fred told her that different races shouldn't mix is what it comes down to.
She says interdancing leads to intermarriage.
Yeah.
And that, black mixing with white leads to gray, and that's nowhere, and that bothers her. And Mrs. Garrett is like, well, she kind of challenges it, saying like, you used to think for yourself, like, is this what you think, or is this what this guy's saying essentially is the gist of their conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And she has this like emotional reaction, this breakdown that, and she says, you think it's a terrific thing giving a black girl a white education and white friends. And she expresses these concerns over losing her identity, which I think are valid. However, her parents are the ones who sent her to this school, not Mrs. Garrett. I just thought that was a weird thing to put on Mrs. Garrett. She didn't choose for Tootie to be there.
Yeah, but it is like a really powerful moment, especially from such a young performer. Like, she might not be like faucet face like Nancy McKeon, but she gets legitimately teary-eyed.
It's heartbreaking to like,
yeah,
she's good at it.
Yeah,
Kim Fields,
man.
She know how to act her ass off. Okay, she's working like rent is due. Okay. She is $500 short. That is what she is doing. That's the performance she's putting on.
And she's like 10. She's like she's a child.
Right.
Yeah, honestly.
She is selling it. And then she storms off upstairs and the audience like hesitantly applauds the scene because they're like, we want to we're like, good work, ma'am, but also what's happening?
Yeah.
Like,
so Tootie's upstairs in the room. It's obviously time has kind of passed a little more, and her three friends bust in. Her three friends being Natalie, Joe, and Blair, because there will be other friends who we see later. Natalie's like, I finally asked Alan out to the dance, and he kind of laughed a lot, but he said yes. And Tootie is like excited at first because this is her best friend telling her something good and exciting has happened, except for then she kind of cools it down and is just kind of like, that's nice.
I find that so weird. I'm like, you can't be happy for your friend. Okay, I see. Like,
it is a weird reaction for her, and especially Tootie and Natalie are besties. They've been that's been pretty constant through season 1, and carries on through the remainder of the show. So it is it's unusual to see her respond this way to Natalie. And Natalie is like, are you okay? And Tootie does that thing of like, sure, I'm okay. And then Natalie is like, I don't think you're okay, because if you were okay, you wouldn't be like, sure, I'm okay. And it's like, that's friendship.
Big best friend mood. It's like, okay.
Yeah, Tootie and Natalie are kind of having a little bit of friction.
Mm-hmm.
Joe wants to know what's bugging her, and Tootie's like, I'm finding out who I am. I'm black. And they're like, oh my God, we had no idea.
I do want to say, though, that I love the moments when Natalie imitates Tootie, because it happens a couple of times throughout the show, but it's like one of those great things about their friendship. Also, Natalie's really good at it.
It is fun because they know each other so well.
Yeah.
But yeah, they all feign shock at her announcement that she is black, which obviously she's not telling them. They do know this, but she's trying to like claim this identity. And Blair's like, well, we're all different. I'm Blair Warner and you are not. And she's looking right at Joe when she says it, which is true. This is a fact that is the difference between them. But Tootie's like, she's like, I'm the one who's different when we're talking about us as a collective, and she doesn't want to forget that difference. So Natalie jokingly suggests that she write a note, and this kind of struck a chord with me in that sense of like, when you're trying to genuinely be serious or express something, and your friends are trying to roll with you, but like it comes off as flippant, and it's so frustrating. And that specific one, I was like, that's like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I don't want it.
Yeah,
it's not helping.
No,
not at all.
Mrs. Garrett enters with the dress that Tootie made, but Blair's like, whoa, what dress is that? And it is a Galabia, which Tootie has chosen instead of whatever thing Blair wanted.
Blair wanted spaghetti straps and an empire waist.
Oh, yeah, she pronounced
or whatever.
Empire weird, and she's called it empire.
Yeah, empire,
like
empire.
It was unnecessary.
Some like Warner textile speak. I don't know.
It's something.
Yeah.
She comments that the dress is very African. There's like a scarf piece to it that Natalie's trying to figure out where it goes, and Blair's like, oh, it's a hip scarf, so she kind of ties it around her waist, and Tootie says like higher, so she ties it around her boobs and is like, oh, it's a bra, and she's like, no, it's a kalimba, which is a headdress, and Joe tells her to wrap it around her face because she can't resist.
These two, the Bickersons.
All of them. Mrs. Garrett says it's dynamite. She loves it. Tootie says she wants people to know that her work was made by a black person. Blair suggests if she'd like to do that, she should put it on the label next to the dry cleaning instructions. And Tootie's...
Which I found very funny.
And it's like, it's one of those things where Blair, I think, is being genuinely earnest on something. And Tootie's like, are you making fun of me? And she's like, no, like, if you want people to know that a black person made it, put it on the label. Like, but she, you know, she likes it. She says the dress is a knockout, and Tootie doesn't believe her. She thinks she's being placated. Natalie accuses her of being sensitive. And this is a terminology too that has surfaced already in this season about Joe being sensitive. And it's interesting, I think, and in an era where someone being upset over something in a way that maybe seems extreme is considered sensitive, like stop being so sensitive.
Yeah.
And I think through a 2024 lens, it's like, it's so interesting to tell people to not be sensitive, because like we know that's kind of it's important to recognize your feelings and understand them. And, you know, for us Gen Xers, they were like, don't do it. Just don't have the feelings and don't recognize them and don't express them.
It's true.
Yeah, no one has time.
No. We're too busy smoking cigarettes in restaurants.
Exactly. We need to be giving each other lung cancer.
It was a different time.
Truly.
Blair comments that if she didn't like it, she would be honest about it, which I think that is a true fact about Blair Warner, is she will voice her opinion. And again, this feels a little bit like kind of one of the supportive big sister moments of like, bitch, I would tell you if I thought it was ugly. Like, I do like it. Mrs. Garrett suggests they go have ice cream. Joe has this ridiculous comment of that she doesn't care what flavor, whether it's chocolate or vanilla. And everyone is like, why did you say
Like, girl.
She's like trying in her own way, but it's not the time, Joe.
Even Blair is like she's like, what did you say?
Tootie is so done with everyone.
I really did actually love how terrible everyone was at trying to like connect, because that felt very real, that like they're all like, no, like, we love you, we support you, here's a bunch of terrible things that we're gonna say that we think are great and we're bad at it.
Yeah, and it's weirdly like one of those things where it doesn't feel like, I don't know, I feel like when this stuff gets talked about more now in modern TV, it's like feels more forced and like, yeah, these are the things white people say that's really annoying, am I right? As if like white people are in on it, whereas like these feel like genuine, honest, like, oh, we're just trying to be helpful, and you can almost kind of see the humanity in it. I think that's it, that you lack seeing more now. And so I found that kind of nice to see that.
Yeah, I think what we see a lot right now is like it's overcorrective, where it's like trying to wink at the audience and say, oh, but we know that this is what people say. I've run into this in stuff when I'm reading, you know, books. Sometimes I'll be reading something and it'll be a historical piece of fiction, but it'll have a very modern sense of like how it references something. And I'm like, but that's not how people talked about that then. So that's like weird that you're being so corrective about it in a way that doesn't feel natural to the narrative. And so I that was what I enjoyed about this, was I felt like this was a bunch of teenagers doing what they think is helpful, and it's bad. And the show doesn't try to be like, well, Joe, you can't compare ice cream to like someone's racial identity. Like, we don't need to have that conversation, because it's kind of point blank obvious.
Yeah.
In the moment. Tootie she's invited some other friends over, and she's gonna go meet them downstairs. They are down in the lounge, and there's 3 new girls that we have not seen before.
Presumably the only other 3 black women at Eastland would be my guess.
Truly.
Yeah.
And I know we see Terry again. I don't know if we see Julia and Madge ever again.
I don't think that we do, but yeah, Terry reappears, and she's in maybe 5 episodes, I want to say.
Yeah.
Terry once again giving the biggest lesbian vibes I have ever
She in her tracksuit, because the other 2, so Julia and Madge are in like the traditional like Eastland uniform with the cardigan. Terry is straight up in her Eastland tracksuit. She is ready to, she like goes for those cookies when she's serving cookies and lemonade, and she says, you know, I guess you're all wondering why I called you here. And then she's like, I've always wanted to say that. And I was like, me too, Tootie, me too. And she wants to discuss the things that they as black women share. And Terry's like, oh, or she said, what is that? And she's like, well, we all come from the same place. And Terry's like, oh, you're from Baltimore too? Which is actually, as Scout pointed out when we were watching, like, it's not far off, because Tootie's family is from DC, so they are neighbors. It's
pretty close.
They're in the DMV.
But she's like, no, I mean originally. And Terry's like, oh, well, originally we're from Atlanta. Julia's like, she means Africa. Like, get on the page. Because Julia loves Africa. She writes poems. She wrote a poem called Ghana with the Wind.
It's phrased as Julia is, quote, into Africa, which is like, to me, a really funny way to say that.
I was saying, you can tell by the shell beads in her hair and the very intricate braid.
Yes, she's the one. 100%. She's got.
But also Madge points out that like her family's from Jamaica, so like for her the African roots don't feel as significant.
Yeah.
Historically, I mean,
yeah.
You know, origin, different port. I don't know, but you know, that's the thing.
But it is like just an acknowledgement that people can be black and not have the same culture.
Given that it's 1980 and they're having this kind of like extensive of a conversation about it, it's kind of really ahead of its time, I think, because I think that that's still something that has to be like an entirely huge conversation about it, or just like not gone into enough depth about. So I think I really appreciated that about this as well. It was very surprising.
That is something that this show, especially in these earlier seasons, once you hit the mid 80s, this is not exclusive to this program, but sitcoms kind of shifted, and they went from kind of these social commentary vibes more into kind of sitcoms as we kind of know them more, or knew them at least through up until they kind of stopped doing the traditional sitcom. This era was very much kind of the topic driven, especially the Norman Lear shows in general. I think this show it navigates a lot of stuff in ways that 40 some years later I look at it and go, we don't have conversations like this on television in this way. Mm-hmm. That we were having on these kind of corny sound stages that still somehow managed to feel a little more real and grounded than prestige stuff of today.
Well, and especially also given that this is written by two white women, and I think for white people in general, because white is seen as the default, we don't think about the process of understanding and coming to terms with your racial identity, which is a normal thing to go through in adolescence. For it to even be acknowledged to this degree and written about by white women fairly with a fair amount of understanding, it sounds like, is kind of impressive.
Yeah.
I guess too, if you look at, and again, this show Norman Lear didn't head it up in the same way that he did his other shows, but it was his company that handled this, and this show came out of his desire for there to be a show that reflected kind of what his daughter's experiences were. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's what his legacy is kind of reaching out and saying, we don't talk about this, we don't talk about this, we don't talk about this, so why don't we talk about these things in a format, in a structure that is entertaining. It's refreshing, I guess. And I don't know if it's been so long since we've done it that we're all looking back at it going, oh yeah, hey look, it is possible to have these conversations. They were doing it half a century ago.
Oh my God, you can't say it like that.
I know.
Well, not quite for them, but it's getting close. Listen, I am 1 year older than the show, so I feel it in my bones. All right, so back to these young ladies having their meetup. Madge's boyfriend Jamal is very into poetry, and Julia is like, hey, when are you going to set me up with Jamal's brother? And there's like a whole thing about that. Terry, however, doesn't date; she runs, which. Again,
which
okay, girl.
Yeah.
And she's like, Tootie, you can come hang out with me while I'm at practice. I'd be cool with that. And she's like, okay, what time do you do that? And Terry says 4. And Tootie's like, oh, before dinner. And she's like, no, 4 in the morning. And Tootie's like, I don't need that in my life.
Same.
That's too early to do anything. Mm-mm. Blair and Natalie then enter, and Blair has clearly at some point given Madge some advice about a dress to wear, that she knew that blue dress would really turn Jamal on. Sure, okay. It's just such a weird way to talk to people. I don't understand.
Yeah.
That's one thing. The writing in this episode is great on the social issue sense, but the dialogue is like, what the hell are these girls saying to each other?
Some of it just goes way too on the nose.
Julia is the Latin Club president. Did I even say that as a sentence? Julia is the Latin Club president.
No, she's running for Latin Club president.
She's running. Sorry. Julia is campaigning for Latin Club president. Latin Club president, for whatever reason, is difficult right now. And she speaks in Latin, and she translates, and she says, they will rise highest who strive for the highest places. And Natalie, bless her, raises a fist and says, e pluribus unum, have a nice day.
Girl.
Then the white girls leave the room. They peace out. They're just like, we popped in to just be like, hey, and then they go out. They go out that door. There's like a side door that is only utilized when we need to have entrances and exits. Entrances and exits.
Exits.
Wow. I'm not sure where that door goes.
It goes outside somewhere because, like, that's the door. Like when Joe comes back from the arcade, she comes in that door,
Right,
and
but
like
they also come in down by. I mean, maybe it connects to a hall.
I don't
Trying to
know.
figure out the logistics of this set is not worth
It's not real.
anyone's time. Anyway, they conveniently have to go out that door. So they leave. Julia is also. She's like, I need to go. She Tempest fugits her way out. You know, time flies. Madge also has to leave, but she's like, this was a cool idea. You know, like we should, you know, hang out once in a while. And Terry literally jogs away from the situation.
oh, Terry.
Mrs. Garrett comes in and she asks how it went. Tootie's disappointed. She's like, Julia's into Latin, Madge is into Jamal, and Terry's into running. And there's just, I don't have anything in common, you know, with them other than the fact that we're all black. And Mrs. Garrett's like, well, it takes time to form friendships. You have to get to know people if that's what you want. And Tootie is confused because she likes her friends that she has, you know, but they're all white. And she just doesn't, she's still struggling with kind of parsing that. And then the biggest reveal of the episode is that she has asked Fred to be her dance partner for the dance contest instead of Carl. And Mrs. Garrett's like, that's fine, but your friends are kind of upset that you're distancing yourself, which is fair, but also I'm like, well, Tootie is kind of going through a thing, so it also makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And she admits that she's struggling with it, and she asks Mrs. Garrett for help, and Mrs. Garrett is like, well, the black experience is not my experience.
Again. It's just good for you.
She's like, I don't know.
Honestly.
But she's like, you know, why don't you kind of do some reflection, you know, look inside yourself. What are you feeling? You know, you've gotten all this input from this guy who's talking to you, but like, what do you think? I'm giving Mrs. Garrett more. She did not say this much, but it's what the vibe I got from her. So we now go to the dance party, and Mrs. Garrett is doing the craziest dance I've ever seen, where she's just like repeatedly pointing at the floor.
And then she does like a dip down to the floor and like comes back up.
Like
and then
they were like, Charlotte Rae, what we need is for you to do like literally like the whitest dance. You are a star of stage and screen. Give us your best. And she was like, great, I've got it.
And then she like pulls a handkerchief out of her boobs to like to fan herself with. It was unhinged, honestly.
But she's the jitterbug queen of Wisconsin, so I'm not sure where those moves came from. I want to believe it's a combination of, well, I don't know what it is actually, but I want to say, is this what she thinks the young people are doing? Does she think this is disco? She's like, disco's a lot of pointing, right? And so she like,
but in the wrong direction.
yeah. It's like, girl, go try up. And by the end of her dance, she is exhausted. She is just like, woo, that took it out of me. It took it out of me also watching it.
I mean, all of us.
Fred is there and he is complaining about everything. Tootie is like, ugh, but I'm here with you. Blair enters wearing her dress, just stating that it's beautiful and also doesn't she look wonderful in it? She does admit that she couldn't wear the headscarf piece because her hair is her crown and glory, but Tootie appears fine with that. She thinks Blair looks great. Then we have the gayest moment of the episode, which is when a guy approaches Joe and just says hi, and she gives him the biggest stank face, and she's like, what are you smiling at? And he runs away, and then another guy tries to approach her, and she says, just keep walking, nerd.
And she's like smiling a little bit about all of this. She loves that she's scaring these guys off. It's the gayest thing.
No, the gayest part of this is what she is wearing, because she's wearing what you give to a lesbian. They're like, you have to wear a skirt. She's like, well, then I don't know. I found this one. Like, it's like looks like she's from the prairie.
Literally looked like she borrowed it off of that set, which I think was on around the same time. You just go to their work. This outfit looks like something that on like Christmas morning or Easter morning, your grandmother gives you in that box, and the wrapping paper, you open that shit and you're like, thanks. I love it. I'll definitely wear it all the time.
But that is 100% where it came from. She was like, I have a nice outfit my grandmother made for me. I'll wear it to the dance.
Oh God.
And it's not
so true.
Okay, but last episode for Double Standard, when she went to the cotillion, she wore that weird peasant dress that, again, I don't know what the hell is going on coming out of the 70s into 1980. Fashion was out of control. It is wrong. It is distressing. It is It is not right.
No,
And I don't like it. So she put on her nice clothes to go to the dance. So I can't get over it. It was so much. Okay, so anyway, forget about that. Let's put that aside. It's now time to warm up for the dance contest. So the music, oh my God, all afternoon that song has been in my head. Now it's fortunately gone, but I'm trying to remember it because it's generic like...
Oh, I remember it because it is still in my head.
Please, will you grace us with... Oh yeah, that's right. It's that like... and it's just like a loop and it just keeps going. So they start to warm up their dancing and Fred can't dance. He's not good at dancing.
He's awkward.
Granted, I don't know that anybody in this episode can really truly dance, but except for whatever Mrs. Garrett was doing. Yeah, he's not a good dancer. Joe makes a comment that's like, well, another myth is shot to pieces because he cannot dance. Carl steps in and says it's not too late for Tootie to change her mind. And Fred kind of challenges him of like, are you trying to step in on, my date? And Joe is like delighted that there might be like a fight at the dance. She's like right there.
Same. Me and Joe, same person at the party.
It's happening. But Carl's like, I already have 3 girlfriends. I just want to dance with Tootie.
What is Carl's life? He eats out of the freezer. He has 3 girlfriends.
He lives fast. That's why he's not going to make it to 30.
It's true.
Live fast, die young. That's what he's...
Eat out of the freezer. Fred comments, yeah, you want to dance with her so she'll help you win. And he was like, or Tootie says, why would he want to dance with somebody who would help him lose?
Right.
She stands up for herself, but then Fred's still kind of challenging Carl, saying, oh, you probably think that Tootie has a rhythm. And Tootie's like, no, that Carl has the rhythm. I'm the crowd pleaser. And Fred is like, you want to dance with that white boy? And she's like, no, I want to dance with Carl. And he says, everyone at the dances white, which he... I believe has a point because everyone...
Yeah, it's true.
We have the combination of this episode is topical, but also when you are an extra on a set, you get music maybe at the beginning of the scene to know what you're dancing to, and then it's silent and all you hear is like feet shuffling and dialogue. So no one there is actually dancing to anything. There's a girl in the background of one of the scenes who's just like really feeling it. She's doing like a whole thing. It's all off. It's a nightmare, but it's a wonderful nightmare. But Tootie says, if they all dance white, well, so do I, because I taught them everything that they know. And so he's like, well, they must need lessons. And then she's like, okay, this needs to stop. She's not having it anymore. And they have a little more exchange. She tells him to lighten up. And that's just one more joke about...
Well, because she also says it's a pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah.
That was her sick burn to him, and her face is all like,
That's right. She like really sells it.
Yeah. It's so good.
And she's over it. She's like, you know what? I like my friends. I like dancing with Carl. But she's like, my taste can't be all bad because I chose you to be my date and or her boyfriend or whatever he is to her. And he, the same way, similar to earlier when like he kind of won her over by being charming, her saying that to him, he seems like okay with it. So he backs off. And now it's time to see these champions dance. And she's like, clear the floor except for my roommates because I want them to be here to support me. All of these white children clap off beat, except for Joe, who's not clapping. Joe just has her arms crossed and she's like watching intently. And they dance and it's thrilling. It's not thrilling. Their moves are nothing to write home about. That's probably, I don't know. I was expecting more, but they dance.
They dance.
And they have a good time. And that's the end of the episode.
Well, I was going to say, as this whole scene is going down with Tootie and Fred and Carl. Yeah. I mean,
you're talking about what I'm going to pull up.
That's what I was realizing was probably about to happen.
During all of that, really important topic, really important business happening. But in the background, Blair is like far away. So in the background of this episode, Blair's back here.
Yeah.
But she ends up right here next to Joe. And then they're like really close to each other talking. Like it's like really a lot. And then there's a girl like
she's like dancing.
Yeah, like
up
what's
on her.
happening? And then the girl behind them is like, hey girls, what are you guys talking about? Anyway, my point is that they're all of a sudden kind of up on each other. And there's a point where Carl turns around and he kind of looks at them like, what are you guys doing? Anyway, it was just a weird gay moment that was in the background of this.
It's happening.
Look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he turns and
Wow.
he's like, what the hell's going on back here? And he's like, we have dancing to do. I don't have time for these lesbians. Anyway, that was just an aside. And then she's like, hey, look at me. I don't know, Mrs. Garrett is doing something weird.
I don't know what's happening.
No one can clap on the beat.
No. Oh, God, this is...
They're spinning, they're dancing.
They're at least moving mostly
a lot
in
of
sync.
Arms. But Joe is really into it.
Yeah, Joe's like, oh, okay.
Some hand
Hand
stuff.
jiving, yeah. Do you think this dance was worthy of the prize?
Oh,
I mean, considering their competition,
yeah,
probably.
seeing everyone else, I think that they certainly must have won. That's it. That's the episode. Who am I? Thoughts, prayers, comments?
I mean, so many. I mean, I really appreciate being able to do this episode because I think that as a black girl who was around a lot of white people in her youth and still today, I think they do a really, again, these are white women in these episodes.
Mm-hmm.
They must have had somebody consultant. I don't know what's going on, but they do a really good job at kind of showing all of the nuances of this thing. And I don't know if this also is just like part of the writing of the show in general, but like even when there's like conflict, it doesn't seem like it's over dramatic or like you know, and I think like you mentioned, like sitcoms kind of shift in the mid 80s, and I'm like thinking about how would this roll out on like Full House or some shit, and like maybe Fred would be kicked out of the dance or some shit, but instead like Tootie's like, I like being here with you, so let's just, you know, vibe. And that felt like, oh, okay. I really just like how this was all kind of put together. Like nothing was super solved and it didn't really need to be. It just put forth this really, I think, important perspective. I'm not 1,000% sure like how it was received. I should ask my mom, but I really liked it all. It was great.
This is exactly why I thought I would like to hear the perspective, at least of a person who may have had a similar experience, because, you know, I can relate to queer identity and different things. But, you know, as a white person, it's like, well, I can watch the episode and be like, sure. Again, I do think this show navigates these kinds of things in a way that is unique to this series, a series that centers around 4 girls. They tried to do it around like 8 girls, and they're like, that's too many. We don't really have this now.
Right.
You know, not in this way. It's, I don't know, through the lens of time, it's kind of like we were onto something a while back, and I don't know when we kind of fell off of whatever it was.
It sounds like, too, like Kim Fields had a good time on the set. Like she didn't seem like didn't enjoy her time on Facts of Life, which again, like that feels like a bit of an anomaly. I think like a lot of black actors and actresses at the time were being sort of exploited or treated badly around this time in television. So it's very unique in that way, even in behind the scenes as well, which I'm like, okay, they was onto something here. I think that's kind of nice.
And the consensus seems to be overall that the 4 women overall had a good, positive experience on the show. There was certain pushback on certain things that were outside of the show itself that I think at times affected them negatively, but it seems like overall it was in some cases perhaps the best they ever had it in their careers. Kim Fields, however, though, she's the one who's worked the most.
Yeah.
Since
she's a powerhouse.
I mean, she's still going, and actually I stand corrected. I'm sure the Upshaws is that's a multicam.
It's on Netflix.
It's on Netflix. It's a multicam, and I assume it's in front of an audience. I don't know though. I never know what's in front of an audience anymore because they can throw laughter on it, but. Yeah, it's still the format still lives, and there's people who are still very skilled at it. So Kim Fields does a spiritual, I don't know, like a revitalization retreat in Atlanta. I'm tempted to go. It's like twice a year, and I'm like, should I go to the Kim Fields retreat? Yeah, it's like
I want to go to the Kim Fields retreat. What?
You should do it. It's like a thing just to like kind of go and reset yourself. So she's working, she's doing retreats, she's out there. She's had a career for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
I don't know, to have started so young and be such an icon. I mean, you know, Tootie is an iconic character. And again, for it to be, I think, you know, Deidre, as you were saying, like seemingly a positive experience and something that she looks fondly on. It's just refreshing and nice. And I'm sure that these women are tired of getting the theme song sung in their direction everywhere they go. And like every time they go on a talk show, everyone wants to ask about the time when George Clooney was on the show. But like, because it's like the same half dozen questions they always get asked. The overall vibe is just like, I'm pleased that something that's so positive for me as a viewer has been positive for them. I'm trying to think on kind of the Tootie tent poles, like that's not the word I wanted, but like the Tootie centric episodes that we have. Because there's the one where she's obsessed with Jermaine Jackson. There's the one where she's angry that she's not, or no, Tootie gets cast in the school production of South Pacific or something.
Oh yeah, and Natalie wanted that
because she
role.
wasn't going to do it, and then she decided, and she's just such a natural that she got cast, and then Natalie's jealous about it. And I don't know, there's just,
I was looking it up, and isn't she like in a bunch of like they said this on Wikipedia, issue themed episodes. So like even stuff about like prostitution.
oh my God,
yeah.
you should come back for the child prostitution episode.
Oh, God.
I would be delighted. I would love to know that's about, because what?
How did we forget about that episode?
I mean, it's hard because the thing is there's like so many episodes are like issue driven that like with everybody, and so I'm like, well, which ones? I'm like, but yeah, like there's that one. There's also the one they're kind of like,
oh, the child model one too.
There's the one where Tootie becomes a child model. There's a spin-off that's not really about her, but it's about her aunt and uncle who are in an interracial marriage that was starred Richard Dean Anderson, aka MacGyver. I don't know who the woman is. I guess when we get there I'll have to evaluate that. Or I'll have to look her up. Evaluate her. Like she's a professional worker.
Evaluate her.
There's the one where like Natalie dates her cousin and she gets
yeah.
weird about it. Yeah.
But she gets weird about it because she thinks Natalie's being racist.
Yeah.
And Natalie's just like, and Natalie's like, well, I didn't want you to be weird about it. It's kind of in a similar vein to this episode, actually.
Yeah.
But it's several years down the road. There's the one where she's dating a guy and everyone's worried that they're going to have sex.
Oh yeah.
A lot of great Tootie episodes to come down the road. A lot of them to do with like being exploited, interestingly.
Well, yeah, now that you lay it out.
And well, she's also the youngest.
Yeah.
Of the girls.
Which would make her the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
All kinds of crazy 80s shit happens.
I think she pops into Living Single after that.
Yeah, because Living Single was what, 92 or 90?
I watched the hell out of that show, so I know that one a lot.
That's right. 93.
Yeah,
it was
before
93,
Friends.
So it dropped the year before Friends. So this show ended in 88. She was like, I gotta get on another show.
She hopped in that. Damn, I mean, to be able to book these roles, like just back to back,
Honestly,
like,
though.
who's doing it like her? Quite incredible. I will say one thing that Fred mentioned that I was like, what? Was he was saying like a confused zebra?
Fred.
I was like, pre-Oreo days, I guess. And what the hell is a confused zebra?
Yeah,
Gross.
That was pretty unfortunate.
So, I mean, that was this episode. I think we covered, everything.
I think so.
We're still feeling out Jo as a character.
She's still a little abrasive at times.
She's a little abrasive. She becomes more likable as we go on, but she's still kind of in her accent. I noticed this. When I was watching this, I was like, her accent is still so thick.
Mm-hmm.
Her like Bronx
She's so New York.
sensibility, and that eventually, yeah, she's from the Bronx. So
Oh, she's from New York.
Nancy McKeon is from Queens, which is interesting because when you hear her talk not as Jo, there's a noticeable difference, but they're both from New York. Yeah, so we are pushing our way into continuing to shape this foursome as who they will grow into and how their friendships and relationships will develop over time. This is, I think, I'm not positive since we're still working through season 1, but I feel like this is one of the first times Mrs. Garrett doesn't have a specific piece of advice. I mean, her advice is literally just like, I don't know, listen to yourself. Because she's like, I can't speak on this. I don't know what it's like to be young and black in America because I have not been one of those things.
Which I think is the best thing she could have said in that situation. Like, honest. Yeah. Girl, I can't help you. I'm sorry. She makes this metaphor that was really good, and I can't remember what it is now, but I was like, shit. It wasn't like spaghetti sauce. I can't remember.
Oh.
She was like, it has to thicken.
It's like simmering. It's like the sauces are cooking with the friendships. Because she was like, I don't know why I don't connect to these girls because we all have this one thing in common. And she's like, well, but your friends that you've known now for years or different pieces of time, she says it's like a sauce that has to thicken and that, it has to have time.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good Mrs. Garrett-ism.
I'm going to bring that to the 2024. I'm going to use that for.
That is interesting too, because her job is to work in the kitchen as the nutritionist. So to have a food-based metaphor suits her.
Is that what she's supposed to be?
So here's a quick timeline of Mrs. Garrett. Mrs. Garrett was originally the housekeeper on Different Strokes. And at the end of season 1, they gave Charlotte Rae her own show, which she crossed over to this show. So there's a backdoor pilot that was an episode of Different Strokes that was really the pilot for this episode, which we're going to cover once we finish season 1 because it's so bizarre and weird.
It's very weird.
So then she came to Eastland and she was a house mother in the dormitory. Like when you watch season 1, episode 1, she's the house mother there at the dorm. And then when they retooled the show now for season 2, her new position is as either nutritionist or dietitian for Eastland.
It's kind of interchangeable.
And she like also is in charge of a bunch of other business for these girls. Like it's not really specified. It's like the title they've given her is this nutritionist thing, but she's so involved in their lives and she's like doing the room assignments, and she's been given the reason the girls live in that space and work at the kitchen is because they got busted at the beginning of season 2. They stole a van and they went to a bar and got arrested.
This 12-year-old girl.
Tootie said, fuck the police.
Tootie said, fuck the police, and poured a pitcher of beer on a cop's head. And so so they went to jail and they were going to be expelled. But Mrs. Garrett said, I'll take responsibility for these girls. And they are tasked with working off the payment for the damages that happened to the school van by working in the kitchen. And so that's kind of
that's the premise for the new season 2 when the show got retooled.
Yeah. So it all happened because Joe came to recap very, very quickly. It all happened because Joe showed up, came to town, was like, I know men. Like I what do you do for men around here? And what do you do? And I know men. And Blair's like, me, I know men. Let's go to the bar. And they were playing heterosexual chicken with each other to prove that they knew men really well, and ended up getting arrested together. It turned into Orange is the New Black real quick.
It really did.
So
Really? Oh God, that's incredible.
This show is free on Tubi. I recommend everyone just watch along because there's so much to learn. Not to mention the season 1, episode 1 episode about accusing people of being a lesbian. Well, I think we've covered it.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate Deirdre. I appreciate you so much for coming on to do this, and I'm so glad that you have enjoyed your dip into this world, and I hope that you continue to explore it. And
I definitely will.
And please come back. We can choose another iconic Tootie episode or anything that if you see a description and go, what the hell is this one?
Now, I will say, I will have to rank all the descriptions that I get from that episode. Let you know in advance as well. But yes, I would be delighted to come back and discuss more Tootie. Thank you for having me.
This has been really fun.
This has been awesome. So we are on Patreon, Eastland to Langley, EASTLAND, the number 2, Langley, LANGLEY. Is that right? I hope so. I'm tired. The links are all in the show notes. Patreon is where we have our season 1 episodes. Season 1 episode 1 is a freebie. Season 1 episode 2 is about to go up this week. The one where we meet Blair's mom.
Monica 1, because there's 2 actresses who played Monica. You can email us at eastland2langleypod@gmail.com. Oh, we're on Threads now. That's right. I keep forgetting about Threads. Because if you're on Instagram, you're on Threads. Like, it just happens that way. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please like it or subscribe to it or rate it, review it. Only if you want to be nice. I don't want to read negative shit. If you didn't like it, just close it. Just put it down. Yeah.
Keep it to yourself.
Yeah, that's right. That's how I feel. That's it.
Women. If I live to be 30, I'll never understand them.